Yesterday, many Pogacar fans were left disappointed, because even though Mauro Vegni himself had promised them that with the first stage finishing in Torino, that their Slovenian idol was going to wear pink from day one, he was defeated, and by a human, Jonathan Naves, in his best performance ever. But if we look at pure data, Pogacar had performed at a very high level, as in San Vito he moved an incredible 8.74 watts per kilo for 3.5 minutes of effort. A very similar level of performance to the one displayed at Flèche Wallonne 2023, where he won on the Mur de Huy. And yet all this came after climbing the Maddalena at full speed. And therefore, the pre-race preview for Stage 2 was clear. UAE Team Emirates were going to blow the race apart on the Oropa climb, and Poggi would perform another exhibition and more, especially when surrounded by a mystical atmosphere, just as the Slovenian loves. As every time the race climbs to the World Heritage Sanctuary, the vomitous propaganda of RCS is cranked into overdrive, and it starts to work on all those who believed that Pantani was clean, or at least just as doped as the others, will revere his mythical comeback after a mechanical failure in the 1999 Giro d'Italia. But fewer people remember other strange events, such as the exhibition of the Soviet Union military colonel Pyotr Ugromov, who left Miguel Indurain lying like a used cigarette butt, and all thanks to the magic of Dr. Michele Ferrari, who was capable of tuning his hematocrit from 30% in winter to more than 64% in May. Or more recently, there was the victory of Tom Dumoulin, dressed in pink, that strange rider linked to Operation Adalas, a man who barely won in the mountains, and he was competing against guys older than him, riders who are still competing in the current Giro d'Italia, like Tramadolito Quintana, or the mummy of Navigare, Domenico Pozzovivo. That is to say, after the events of the previous day, that on this summit there are always exhibitions or mystical situations, and this would only serve to motivate even more a Slovenian alien seeking revenge like Uma Thurman in Kill Bill, of course without being quite as sexy or extremely violent. What's more, he had a brilliant reference in his own Sonia Duval team when the hilariously doped Leonardo Piepoli, at the tender age of 36, rode the fastest uphill time in the time trial of the 2007 Giro d'Italia. So Poggi and Dracula Gianetti's plan was clear: revenge. But with an exhibition too, something the Slovenian alien himself made sure to tell the press when he indicated before the start of the stage that he was going to increase the pace on the final climb a lot. As for the breakaway of the day, we highlight the spectacular role of the semi-unknown young Italian Andrea Piccolo of the doped hipsters Garmin team. Because despite having shone in the Tour of Colombia, this young man with the luxuriant long hair still has no victories as a professional. But he displayed an impressive stamina on the hard passes on the way to the Oropa, worthy of a man capable of fighting for stage victories and maintaining a nice distance over the bunch until halfway up the climb to the Oropa. Kudos to the little Italian for honourably defending his profession. Something that Sky also did during the stage, controlling practically at all times the race, together with the Van Rijssel Casino and the Sonia Duval of the big favourites. However, as usually happens on these kinds of stages, everything was decided at the end, and especially at the end because, as it happened to Pantani in 1999, Poggi also suffered a misfortune when passing through the town of Biella, just at the base of the Oropa mountain. A misfortune that must have made Dracula Gianetti's heart shrink. The UAE manager was ready to silence the criticism of those of us who mentioned his team's tactical errors on a stage much more complicated to manage than a simple high finish. And he was ready to suck the blood out of anyone who tried to get even slightly close to his Slovenian hero. And so when he saw him fall to the ground after his front tyre had been shredded and he skidded on his Colnago, he must have frozen as if he were in a cold, dark Romanian castle, instead of at the Catholic shrine of Oropa. Fortunately, assistance arrived quickly to help Poggi, and the Slovenian still had to start the climb with a 20-second disadvantage over the bunch, and he had to make a comeback, just as the bald pirate revered by the Tifosi had done 25 years earlier. This situation was not as dramatic because today's peloton is full of relative beaters, not of sigma males like the doper Laurent Jalabert or Ivan Gotti. They were not afraid to attack the alopecia-stricken Italian rider despite his jumping chain. In 2024, the peloton is much more woke and aware of today's offence-averse glass society, and so they simply maintained a normal climbing pace. And in less than 2 minutes, Poggi and his UAE were already back at the head of the pack, ready to place their little train, the one paid for by the Arab petrodollars. And they prepared to conquer the shrine of the Black Madonna. And little by little, men like Tramadolito Quintana and the partner of Marion Rousse and the German who was second classified in yesterday's race, or the highly motivated Italians Antonio Tiberi and Giulio Pellizzari, they were left behind by the impressive pace from a shirtless worker. Again, Michael Berg, the Dane, always the Dane, and he has become the biggest peloton breaker of Machin's team, surpassing a consummate multi-tool such as the Austrian Felix Grossschartner. Again, UAE was burning its gregarios, but this time, with less than 10 kilometers to go, this tactic made perfect sense. The Polish veteran Majka acted as a shuttle for Poggi, imposing a very powerful pace, just like Marino Argentin did for Piotr Ugrimov in 1993. It was clear that Poggi had analysed this climb very well, and he knew exactly when and where to attack. And so, with 4.5 kilometres to go, the world number one launched his attack. And then, onto his wheel, jumped a very inspired Ben O'Connor, motivated no doubt by the quality and power of the Van Rijssel, the same machine that had once again made Connefoy the winner in a new town race the day before. And then there was the Welsh alcoholic, as always activating his diesel mode and keeping the distances to a minimum. O'Connor made the same mistake that the one-time doped-up 15-year-old Skelmose Jensen made at Liège. He warned, if you stick too close to the sun, you can get burnt. And in just 100 metres, Poggi had dropped his supposed rival, like the Soviet colonel had done to the vitaminized Navarrese 31 years earlier. And Poggi came back up whistling, and then in a few metres, he'd burst all those who dared to jump on his wheel, in a totally favourable terrain for the alien with the 191 bib on a climb where he wasn't expected to make large differences. But they were hardly going to cut that 34 seconds of advantage that he'd opened with just 3 kilometres to go. And then behind, a monster appeared. One who was taking a Red Bull rest after Romandy. We're talking about the anti-Pogacar, the legendary biathlete Florian Lipowitz, who, acting as a gregario of Daniel Felipe Martinez, approached the Colombian and his compatriot Einer Rubio and Cian Uijtdebroeks and the Welsh alcoholic and the friend of Contratroll Lorenzo Fortunato and the one-hit wonder Michael Storer and the athlete Juan Pedro Lopez, and made his way to the head of the race. On his own, no one working with him, acting as a simple teammate, and yet he proved to be the best pure climber of this Giro d'Italia, suggesting that the Red Bull team had again made a serious mistake by placing him as a simple teammate, instead of one that they had been quietly preparing for the Giro, and they ended up wearing him out in his entirety. Pogacar did what he had to do when he went in pedalling to the end, and he celebrated after crossing the finish line, and this is what he's paid €2 million for after all. The Slovenian did not beat the histrionic and totally doped record of the Christina Jonsson-loving polydrug addict, but he did beat the recent record of the strange Dumoulin, despite the fact that this stage was much longer and much harder. But being only the second day of the race, the records of the Italian and the Dutchman can wait. And after all, he did suffer the mishap of his fall. Giannetti was full of pride. Poggi, looking very thin, was now already wearing pink. So maybe he won't wear that jersey for 21 days of racing, but he might wear it for 20, especially when we consider the incredible differences he created for what appeared to be remarkably little effort. Maybe